G'day, I'm Sean and these are the new ARRI Pro Camera accessories for the Sony BURANO. If you're familiar with the ARRI Pro Camera accessories for the Sony Venice or Venice 2, then you'll be really familiar with what we have here for the BURANO. Those accessories have been really popular. I would say most rental houses carry them with their Venice, so it made sense not to shake things up too much. In fact, they're so similar that actually the base plates are the same. So we've reused the Venice 2 base plate that we have here, which means that if you have any of the adapters that work with this base plate, such as the little bridge plate adapter, BPA 5, or the bigger shoulder pad, the BSA 1, well, they'll still work with the BURANO, which is great. Moving up from the base plate, on the side here, these are our new side brackets. And these side brackets are kind of cool because they incorporate NATO rails for the first time. So you get both pin-locked 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch holes, as well as a NATO rail which has safety pins which are retractable on the top and the bottom. On the camera right side, we of course have a side bracket at the front, and also new for us, we have a side bracket at the rear here, which is kind of in a similar place where we introduced side brackets for Alexa Mini, Mini LF and the 35. Now on these NATO rails here, you'll see that we are also introducing 2 new NATO rail clamps, NRCs. So these guys here, one is for a video transmitter such as a Teradek, that's the NATO rail clamp 2, makes it really easy to de-rig your camera if you need to make a smaller build. And we have the NRC 1 at the front here, which is where I'm running a rod from with, of course, our ARRI ECS system. And yes, the C-Force Mini RF and the rear one will support triggering the BURANO with a LANC cable. More information on that to come. So they're the new NATO rail clamps. On the top of the camera, well, the top plate will be kind of familiar to those of you who've used the Venice as well. It's a 2-piece construction, so you can either have a very slimline small plate, which would be useful for gimbal builds, or have this full-size top plate, which has heaps of mounting accessory holes, and it supports 3 different top handles. So this is the CCH4, our center camera top handle, which has been around for a long time. It's the kind of standard now for Alexa Mini LF and for many third-party PCA sets. So it also has the same profile as the handle extensions, the Hex kit, which I have running at the back there. But you can also use the existing BURANO top handle that comes with the camera, or you can use the Sony FX9 top handle as well, which has an electronic interface which we support at the back here. It goes directly into the top of the BURANO, and then you can get a rec stop button on the top of your top handle, as well as a zoom rocker, which is quite nice. Now we're introducing 4 new sets for these accessories. Let's look at those now. The Pro Camera accessories for the BURANO come in 4 different sets. So we have Pro sets and Basic sets in both Cine and Broadcast flavors. Now this is the basic broadcast set, but all of the basic sets come with a top plate. And in this particular configuration, I've removed the center section of that top plate so that I can continue to use the standard BURANO top handle and Sony's viewfinder mounting mechanism. At the front here, you also get a detachable lightweight 15mm rod console, which will screw into the front of the top plate so that you can add top rods for things like a lens motor or maybe a different viewfinder mounting mechanism. All of the basic sets also come with the base plate, which is of course the same as the one that we have for the Venice. And inside that base plate, you get 240mm long, 15mm diameter, lightweight stainless steel rods. The differences between the broadcast basic set and the Cine basic set, well, that comes down to what's under the base plate. So in the broadcast version, you get a BSA1, that's the broadcast shoulder adapter. So that is this plate here, which has a nice soft shoulder pad in combination with the VCT mounting mechanism. You can use that with standard Sony VCT plates, or consider grabbing an ARRI QRP1. That's our quick release plate, and it's our lighter version of that Sony VCT plate. If you opt for the Cine set instead, well, you don't get the BSA1, and instead you get a bridge plate adapter. This is the BPA 5. It slides in exactly the same way and then locks in with a little safety. And from here you can adapt to, say, a tripod snap plate, or attach a BP8 for Studio 19mm rail support, or a BP9 for 15mm studio rail support, or you could use the BPS2, which is our very tiny bridge plate, which allows you to attach to a dovetail plate if you don't need studio rods. All right, let's look at the Pro set. Now both Pro sets are also very similar. They both come with the top plate, which I'm using with that center section as well so that I can attach the CCH4, which comes with each Pro set. That's our center camera handle and it has the same profile as all our hex extensions, so consider picking up one of those as well. At the front here we have the RMB3, which of course has been around for a really long time as well, and in this instance I'm using it to adapt to the Sony viewfinder system along with the 15mm reduction insert that also comes with the set. I still get the lightweight 15mm console on the front and I get all the side brackets in the Pro set, so the left side, the right side and the new rear side bracket that we have. In addition to that, I get the two new NATO rail clamps. So that's the NRC1 for a 19mm rod, which is handy for running lens motors down the side of your camera, and the NRC2, which you can use for video transmitters. On the bottom, of course, it's the same base plate. It also comes with those 240mm long rods, and in the Cine version, I get that BPA5 again, the bridge plate adapter. The only difference to the broadcast Pro set is that you would get the BSA1 broadcast shoulder adapter instead. All right, now let's go through all of the components individually and I'll build the camera for you. All right, now for the components. I'm going to start with the top plate as that probably has the most complexity to it. We've had to support, or we've chosen to support, 3 different top handles with this top plate. So it comes in 2 parts. We have this center section, which you would use either if you want a very small top plate or if you wanted to use the CCH4, the ARRI top handle. And we have the larger part, which of course works in tandem, but will also support 2 different Sony top handles. So before we start with this, if we take a look at the BURANO, it ships with this top handle. Now, we'll have to pull it off. It has 4 screws. Bear in mind that Sony don't use metric hex screws. These are imperial, so they are a 3/16 in the top, so you will need to get a 3/16 Allen key driver. And when you've taken these off, we can reuse them. So if you wanted to run a very lightweight top plate, which might be useful for some gimbal stuff, as the BURANO doesn't have too many centered holes in the top of the camera body itself, I can take just the center section of the top plate, put it here and then reuse those screws if I wanted to do that. Could be good for Steadicam low mode as well, so that would be useful. Otherwise, we don't need these 4 screws, so I'm going to put those over here. From this point, you can see that either we attach these 2 parts and use the existing screws that are captive inside our top plate, or if you wanted to continue to use the BURANO top handle, then you can put it back on top of the camera and then slide the top plate in from the front and then screw it in. There are a couple of tricks here. First off, the BURANO also ships with a tape hook and this little cable guide that you can use to clip in the viewfinder cable. Now we've designed the top plate so that it will fit over the top of the cable guide while it's screwed in, which is quite nice, and it will clear the tape hook. But both can be removed. So if you take a very small Phillips, I think this is a 0 or a 00 Phillips, you can unscrew that. Bear in mind the tiny screw in here is not captive either, so I've already lost one this morning, so don't do that. But we can put that back on top and then I can reattach this little cable guide into the little screw hole here above the O of other. You'll see that there aren't any markings around it, but there's only one of them, so that will allow me to put the cable guide on like that. Now, when you're attaching the top plate, you need to have, if you don't run the center section, you need to have the top handle on there first. And I wanted to draw your attention to this. We have this interesting little hook system here with these hooks that flip in and out of the way. And the reason we have those is because we support both the BURANO and the FX9 top handle, and those top handles have a different thickness. So if we want to put a plate over the top of the top handles, we need to account for the difference in the thickness of this little section here where the screw would go through. So if you look on the top again, we have a little screw here, and it says FX9 top handle one way or other top handles the other. Maybe you can see better over here. And actually on the screw itself, there's a very small little laser engraved arrow. So this is the FX9 top handle side, and if I want to go to other top handles, then I rotate the screw this way. You can only rotate the screw 90 degrees, and you can see under here that this is engaging the little hook. So as I'm not using the FX9 top handle, I've set it to other top handles on both sides. And now I know that that little spacer is out of the way so that this will line up. So I can put this in here. Now, once again, because this is an ARRI PCA product, we are using multi-hex screws, which means that I can use a 3mm, a 4mm, a 5mm, or a 5/32 of an inch Allen key. They will all fit into all of the 6 screws on the top of the top plate. So it's kind of nice we use the same 4 mounting holes at the front to keep the top handles secured, and we use the little screw holes at the back of the top plate so that we have more support at the rear of the plate. So that would be how we run the BURANO top handle. You would run the SONY viewfinder mounting mechanism in the front here. That's just a 15mm rod. There's a little clamp underneath. It is a bit easier to make sure that that rod is clamped with the handle off because it's kind of hidden away under here. But bear in mind, just so you know, that will work. And this would be the top plate setup for the basic set that we are selling for the BURANO. Now, the other little thing to notice when you're doing these screws up, we've kind of changed the method a little bit, and underneath the plate there are rubber pads that interface with the top of the camera. It just makes sure that it's super grippy and that we don't scratch the camera or anything. And so you will feel a little bit of compression when you're really doing the screws up, which is not kind of a normal thing with ARRI PCA products, but just bear that in mind. If you're a rental house prep tech who's used to screwing plates on and off all day, it's something to bear in mind. Now, I just wanted to point out that this little section at the back here, that houses the electronic interface for the FX9 top handle. And so if you wanted to use this top handle, you can obviously remove that plate. Again, those screws aren't captive, so watch out. Put the top handle on, and then you can use the screws, again, that are captive in our top plate to mount the FX9 top handle like so. Again, make sure that you switch that little switch to FX9 top handle instead of other top handle if you are using that one, but I'm going to leave it on other. Other is the correct setting when you're using the center part of the top handle too. So I'm going to put these two together now, and we're going to build this up as if it's a bit more of a pro set. Make sure that the holes line up. Oh, that's the wrong Allen key, but it will work because it's multi-hex. So 3mm in here, going along. Now, I mentioned the tape hook before as well, so you can leave the tape hook where it would be living in the side or the top, the front here of the BURANO, but we have also made some little holes in the top plate so that you can attach it to the top plate. So there are these little screw holes here, so you can unscrew the tape hook and put it in the front for when you need to use a tape measure. Now, other things to say about the top plate, you have 1/4 inch pin lock holes, you have 3/8 inch pin lock holes, and you have our 20mm spaced M4 holes, which is the mounting standard for the RMB3 and a bunch of other brackets that we make. So that will screw here on the side, or actually on the front. So at the front of the top plate here, we have another 3/8 and some 1/4 inch holes. Might be good for an RMB6 if you wanted to mount a front-facing single 19mm rod. Good for Steadicam when you're running a motor either side, easier to balance. Or you can put the RMB3 up here, put that little 15mm rod reduction insert inside it, and then you can mount the viewfinder here instead of mounting it off the top plate if you prefer. Okay, let's flip the camera over. So now we have this all mounted, and then I'm going to attach the base plate. Again, same base plate as the Venice. It just attaches like so with 2 screws, like this. Again, these are multi-hex screws on the bottom, which is nice, so 4 different Allen keys will all work. And that is done. So now that we have this with the top and bottom plate, I can start to mount the side brackets. So the side brackets are very similar, but on the top of the bracket it will tell you which one it is. So this is not the one I need. I need the one for the right-hand side of the camera. And then again, these are multi-hex screws, but only for a 3 or a 4mm, as they need to be slightly smaller diameter, or a 5/32, just not the 5mm. So I can screw these in like so. Now the side brackets, they again have that pin lock 1/4 inch. It's kind of a newer standard that we made with a bunch of other different accessory manufacturers and is being more widely supported now, which is great to see. And we have the 3/8 inch standard ARRI screw here, again with those pin lock holes. We cannot fit in horizontally spaced holes for an RMB3 because we now incorporate that NATO rail, and so the spacing of the RMB3 holes would be wider. But this is the NATO standard. We have these two little release mechanisms. They're blue, they're easy to find so that you can release the NATO accessories, but all I would need to do if I took, say, this, the NRC1, which is our rod mounting bracket, I just slide it over, lock it off, and if I need to remove it, come to the end and then pull that little release back to pop it off. So that is the front bracket on the right side. The rear bracket for the right side is also here, so that screws into these two 1/4 inch holes on the top plate. So I can put that in here. And we also have a third screw further down. Because we made this quite a long bracket so that you can mount the other NATO rail clamp for a video transmitter towards the bottom of that rear bracket, we've put this extra little screw hole in here, which just helps make sure it doesn't move. There's no flex at all. So that is that. Also, just wanted to point out that this little section here is then a nice little protector for the viewfinder connector, because the viewfinder connector on the viewfinder for the Burano is not an easily replaceable cable, and it's not a standard one that you would be able to make yourself like a BNC, so it's good to have that little bit of extra protection there. Now, the last little bit I have to do is to attach the left-hand side bracket. Now bear in mind that there are a bunch of other accessories that will work with the side brackets too. So we have a little rosette adapters, which you could mount to the side. There are no rosettes here because then the NATO rail wouldn't work, but you can add our little rosette adapters so that you can then add a rosette for hand grips to the bottom or to really anywhere along that side bracket as you like. Okay. Now, again, CCH4 handle has been around for a really long time, but if you are not so familiar with it, we have these two screws here which are sliding, so I can choose what kind of holes I would like to use for this and then move the plate backwards and forwards. And they line up with the screw holes in the top so I can get my driver through. Again, multi-hex. Now, if you wanted to use the Sony Burano viewfinder with this camera, you would need to add something like an RMB3, which comes with the Pro set here, and that would go on the front. There are a number of ways that you can choose to mount this. I'm just going to run it kind of in a downward pointing configuration. Again, 3mm holes into the front, and then I'm going to use that 15mm reduction insert inside the RMB3 so that I can run the Sony viewfinder system. So put that in there like this. And then here's a viewfinder I prepared earlier. Every time I do this, it feels a little bit more and more like a cooking show. So that would go in like that. And now I have the same standard Burano viewfinder system. I can use the little clip up here, which I've taken off the camera body and put onto the top plate. But I'm going to plug the viewfinder cable in there first. You can see that that's nicely protected by this little part of the rear bracket here. And then clip that cable in like so. And now we have something that looks reasonably respectable. The other little points to mention are that we have this guy. This is the lightweight 15mm rod console, and that would attach to the front of the top plate in here if I would like to run top-mounted 15mm rods. And in the Pro set, of course, you get those two NATO rail clamps. So let's chat about those. The NRC1, well, that's pretty straightforward. It's just a NATO rail clamp with the inbuilt 19mm rod clamp so that I can run a rod for lens motors. Now, it will, of course, go in both orientations, up to you, like so, and clamp like that, and then I have a nice spot for a rod for motors. The NRC2, well, this guy is a little bit different. So this is our new kind of universal bracket for video transmitters. Now, I guess it's probably going to be most commonly used with the Teradek, and we've tested a whole bunch of different Teradeks, and they will all work. When you get this bracket, it comes actually with 4 screws. They are not captive, and you only need 2 of them. So we've left you 2 screws, which you can leave in the little garage, as we call it here, in case you need spares. But otherwise, there are something like 12 different positions that you can mount this bracket in so that you can arrange the Teradek how you like. So if I have the clamp on the side here, it might help you to get an understanding of how it works. I'm just going to grab those screws for now. So there's a little kind of system here, an indent where this extra part of the bracket drops in, and then I can mount it in a whole bunch of different places. You can also, of course, mount this bracket to the front. So if you wanted to have a very kind of slimline, side-mounted video transmitter, you could do that as well. So we go like this. Now, this ridge has been designed so that it's an anti-twist mechanism for the video transmitter as well. I don't have one here to show you, but if you consider mounting the 1/4-inch screw, usually those transmitters have a centered 1/4-inch threaded hole. You would put that in here and you can slide it along so that the edge of the transmitter butts up with this little ledge here to stop it twisting, which is great. So take that off for now. And as I mentioned, there are 12 positions that you can put this little plate in, so it goes into the little recess there, and then 2 screws in from the top side, and then the video transmitter would mount on the top. Now there is another kind of nice little benefit of having these NATO side rails here, and that is that the viewfinder mounting system that comes with the BURANO, well, that already is a NATO rail, so I can actually pull this off. There's a little safety release at the bottom here. Whoop. And for argument's sake, if I pull off this viewfinder section, I could then actually mount the whole viewfinder directly to the side bracket, which may not be super useful, but hey, you can do it. And that also means that instead, I can pull the actual loop off of the viewfinder here and then slide this out. This little NATO clamp swiveling system unscrews. You can put it onto the side, make sure that you line up the pin lock little pins there. And then I could have a little low mode set up with this side display for the menu and all that kind of stuff here, so that if I'm doing some low mode stuff or perhaps easy rig or whatever you like. So that would be one option that you can make use of the NATO rail. It is already part of the viewfinder system. But let me just put this back together again, and I think there's about one thing left to talk about, and that is the base plates. As mentioned before, in the Cine sets you get this guy, this is the BPA5, and in the broadcast sets you instead get the broadcast shoulder adapter. This is pretty straightforward, I'm not going to mention too much about that. I just wanted to point out how you would mount a bridge plate. So on the bottom side of this plate, you see that we have 4 threaded holes. You have holes that would actually be centered in line with the middle of the lens and the sensor on the camera, and you have these offset holes. ARRI bridge plates use the offset holes, so if you're not familiar with that, just make sure you're using the right ones, otherwise the studio rods won't be in the correct place, centered underneath the lens, or not centered in the case of 15mm studio. So, and there's also this little indent here, which is for these guide little sprung-loaded safety stoppers. So when you put them together, just make sure that it all lines up nicely, and then you can screw that together, and then slide it underneath the camera, and you have a bridge plate ready to go. So I think that kind of brings us to the end. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions at all, please let us know in the comments, and we'll get back to you. And until then, we'll see you in the next one.